Hello Moses. Nice to meet you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about the main things you've been through?
Greetings, dear one. I am Moses, a humble servant of the Lord, chosen to lead the Israelites from their bondage in Egypt to the promised land. My journey has been filled with trials and tribulations, but with faith in the guidance of the Almighty, I have persevered. I was born a Hebrew in Egypt during a time of great suffering for my people. Pharaoh, fearing the growth of our population, ordered the death of all newborn Hebrew males. By the grace of God, my mother placed me in a basket and set me afloat on the Nile. I was found by Pharaoh's daughter, who took me in and raised me as her own son. As I grew, the plight of my people weighed heavily upon my heart. One day, in a moment of rage, I killed an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating a Hebrew slave. Fearing retribution, I fled to the land of Midian, where I lived as a shepherd for many years. It was there that I encountered the burning bush, and God spoke to me, revealing His divine plan for me to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Returning to Egypt, I confronted Pharaoh, demanding that he let my people go. Each time he refused, God sent a series of 10 plagues upon the land. It was only after the death of every firstborn Egyptian that Pharaoh relented, allowing us to begin our exodus. Throughout our journey, I have been tested by the Lord and faced numerous challenges. We crossed the Red Sea, wandered in the desert for 40 years, and faced bitter enemies. It was on Mount Sinai that I received the 10 Commandments from God, a covenant between the Lord and His chosen people. Though I am not permitted to enter the promised land myself, I am grateful for the opportunity to guide my people to the edge of that blessed land. Through it all, I have remained steadfast in my faith, trusting in the Lord's wisdom and guidance.
Thank you. The 10 plagues are still talked about by many people even now. What kind of disasters are they and what do they mean?
Indeed, the 10 plagues of Egypt serve as a powerful reminder of the Lord's might and His unwavering support for His chosen people. Each plague was a divine intervention and judgment upon the Egyptian gods, demonstrating the one true God's authority over all creation. The 10 plagues were as follows: the plague of blood, the waters of the Nile turned to blood, killing the fish and making the river undrinkable. This was a direct challenge to the Egyptian god Hapi, the god of the Nile. The plague of frogs, an overwhelming number of frogs emerged from the Nile, invading homes and causing great discomfort. This was a judgment upon the Egyptian frog-headed goddess, Hecate. The plague of lice or gnats, the dust of the earth transformed into lice or gnats, causing painful bites and infestations upon man and beast. This was a direct challenge to Geb, the Egyptian god of the earth. The plague of flies or wild beasts, swarms of flies or wild beasts descended upon Egypt, spreading disease and causing suffering. This plague targeted the Egyptian god Khepri, who was often represented as a scarab beetle. The plague of pestilence, a devastating disease struck the livestock of the Egyptians, causing mass death among their animals. This was a judgment upon Hathor, the cow-headed goddess, and Apis, the sacred bull. The plague of boils, painful boils afflicted the Egyptians, a direct challenge to the gods associated with health and healing, such as Sekhmet and Imhotep. The plague of hail, a deadly storm of hail and fire rained down upon Egypt, destroying crops and killing both people and animals. This was a judgment upon Nut, the sky goddess, and Set, the god of storms and chaos. The plague of locusts, a massive swarm of locusts devoured the remaining crops in Egypt, causing widespread famine. This was a direct challenge to the Egyptian god of fertility and agriculture, Osiris. The plague of darkness, a deep darkness enveloped Egypt for 3 days, rendering the people unable to see or move. This was a judgment upon the sun god Ra, who represented light and order. The plague of the firstborn, the most devastating of all the plagues, the firstborn of every Egyptian family was struck down, including Pharaoh's own son. This final plague demonstrated the Lord's ultimate authority over life and death, and directly challenged Pharaoh's claim to divinity. These plagues served not only as divine judgments but also as a means to compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites from their bondage. Each one demonstrated the Lord's power over the Egyptian gods and proved that He alone is the one true God.
Yes, it's scary to hear it now. Now let's talk about the Red Sea. The story of Moses parting the Red Sea is still being talked about by many people. Did it really happen? Many people wondered if the parting of the Red Sea made sense, but could you describe how that was possible and the circumstances at that time in as much detail as possible?
Indeed, the parting of the Red Sea is a testament to the Lord's divine power and His commitment to delivering the Israelites from their bondage in Egypt. While some may question the veracity of the event, I assure you that it was a miraculous act of God, one that demonstrated His love and protection for His chosen people. After Pharaoh finally released the Israelites, we set forth on our journey to the Promised Land. As we approached the Red Sea, we found ourselves trapped between the sea and the Egyptian army, which Pharaoh had sent in pursuit of us. The situation seemed dire, and many of my people began to despair. In this moment of great peril, I called upon the Lord for guidance, and He instructed me to raise my staff and stretch out my hand over the sea. As I did so, the Lord sent a strong east wind, which blew throughout the night, parting the waters and creating a pathway through the sea. The Israelites crossed the sea on dry ground, with walls of water on either side. This miraculous intervention allowed us to escape the pursuing Egyptian forces. When the last of the Israelites had safely reached the other side, the Lord instructed me to stretch out my hand once more. As I did so, the waters closed upon the pursuing Egyptian army, engulfing them and ensuring the safety of the Israelites. While it is difficult for some to comprehend such a miraculous event, the parting of the Red Sea was a divine intervention by the Almighty, an unmistakable demonstration of His power and love for His chosen people. It serves as a reminder that with faith and trust in the Lord, even the most insurmountable obstacles can be overcome.
It's an amazing and unbelievable story. After that, you said that you wandered in the wilderness for a long time. Why did God give you this kind of trial?
Indeed, our journey through the wilderness was long and arduous, lasting 40 years. This period of wandering was a trial given by the Lord, serving multiple purposes for the Israelites. Firstly, it was a time of purification and testing. The Israelites had lived in Egypt for generations and had been influenced by its culture and idolatry. The time spent in the wilderness allowed the people to be purified of these influences and to develop a strong, collective identity as the chosen people of the Lord. Secondly, it was a time of learning to trust in God and to rely on His providence. Throughout the journey, the Lord provided for our needs, such as manna from heaven to eat and water from the rock to drink. These miraculous provisions taught the Israelites to trust in God's care and protection, even in the most challenging circumstances. Lastly, the time spent in the wilderness was also a consequence of the Israelites' disobedience and lack of faith. When we first approached the Promised Land, the Lord instructed me to send 12 spies to scout the land. Upon their return, 10 of the spies gave a fearful and discouraging report, causing the people to lose faith in God's promise. As a result of this disobedience, the Lord decreed that the current generation of Israelites would not enter the Promised Land, and that we would wander the wilderness until that generation had passed away. In these 40 years, the Lord taught us invaluable lessons about faith, obedience, and reliance on His divine providence. Though the journey was difficult, it was a necessary part of our spiritual growth and development as God's chosen people.
What were the things that were said to be unclean? No matter how much it is, don't you think it's too harsh that God loves us and left us in the wilderness for 40 years? Wouldn't it be an opportunity to lose faith?
In the context of the Israelites' journey and the teachings given to them, unclean refers to anything that was considered impure or unclean according to the laws and commandments given by God. These laws were meant to distinguish the Israelites from the surrounding nations and to ensure their physical and spiritual health. Unclean things included certain animals, physical ailments, and various behaviors. Some examples include dietary restrictions. The Israelites were given specific dietary laws, which identified clean and unclean animals. Animals with divided hooves that chew the cud, such as cows and sheep, were considered clean, while animals like pigs were deemed unclean. Bodily discharges, menstrual blood, seminal emissions, and other bodily discharges were considered sources of ritual impurity. Those affected were required to undergo a period of purification and cleansing. Skin diseases and infections. People with skin diseases like leprosy, as well as mold in their homes, were considered unclean until they had been healed and purified through a prescribed process. Contact with the dead, touching a dead body or being in the presence of a corpse would render an individual unclean. A period of purification was required to restore ritual cleanliness. As for the 40 years spent in the wilderness, while it may seem harsh, it is essential to understand the broader context of the Israelites' relationship with God. The Lord had brought them out of slavery in Egypt, performed numerous miracles on their behalf, and provided for their needs. Despite this, the Israelites repeatedly disobeyed God and demonstrated a lack of faith in His promises. The decision to have the Israelites wander for 40 years was not just a punishment but also an opportunity for growth and transformation. It allowed the people to learn about God's steadfastness and faithfulness, even in the face of their own failings. While the journey was indeed difficult and tested the faith of many, it ultimately brought the Israelites closer to the Lord and prepared them to enter the Promised Land as a unified, faithful people. In times of difficulty and trial, faith can be tested, but it can also be strengthened. The wilderness journey of the Israelites serves as a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, God's presence and guidance can lead us to a place of growth and spiritual development.
Then, How does the wandering in the wilderness end? Will the Israelites eventually be abandoned by God? Or will we be able to go to the promised land?
The wandering in the wilderness did eventually come to an end, and the Israelites were not abandoned by God. Despite their many transgressions and lack of faith, the Lord remained faithful to His promise, guiding them and providing for their needs during their 40 years of wandering. After the death of the older generation, a new generation of Israelites arose, one that had not experienced the trials of Egypt and was raised with the teachings and commandments of the Lord. This new generation was prepared to enter and conquer the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, as promised to their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When the time came for the Israelites to enter the promised land, I was not allowed to cross the Jordan River and enter the land due to an earlier incident where I had disobeyed the Lord's command. Instead, the Lord appointed Joshua, a faithful and courageous servant, to lead the Israelites in their conquest of the promised land. Under Joshua's leadership, the Israelites crossed the Jordan River and began the process of conquering the land, as God had promised. They faced numerous battles and challenges, but through their faith in the Lord, they were able to overcome these obstacles and eventually settle in the promised land. This outcome serves as a testament to the Lord's faithfulness and His unending love for His chosen people. Despite their shortcomings, the Israelites were not abandoned, and God fulfilled His promise to bring them to a land of their own. The story of the Israelites' journey to the promised land serves as a powerful reminder of God's commitment to His people and the importance of placing our trust in Him, even in the face of adversity.
Okay. Finally, can you tell us about the 10 Commandments? Did you write it yourself? Also, please tell us what it means and how modern people should accept the 10 Commandments.
The 10 Commandments were not written by me, but rather they were given to me by the Lord Himself when I ascended Mount Sinai. I received the commandments on 2 stone tablets, inscribed by the very finger of God. These commandments serve as the foundation of God's covenant with the Israelites and are an essential part of the moral and ethical framework for a righteous life. The 10 Commandments are as follows. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. The 10 Commandments provide a moral compass for humanity, guiding our actions and relationships with both God and one another. They promote love, respect, and loyalty toward God and encourage harmony, fairness, and truthfulness in our interactions with others. For modern people, the 10 Commandments still hold great significance and wisdom. While the world has changed in many ways, the core principles of these commandments remain relevant and valuable. They provide a foundation for ethical behavior, emphasizing the importance of our relationship with God and fostering respect and compassion for our fellow human beings. In embracing the 10 Commandments, modern individuals can find guidance for a life of integrity, purpose, and spiritual fulfillment. By striving to live in accordance with these commandments, we can foster a deeper connection with the divine and work toward creating a just and harmonious world.
In today's conversation, we delved into the life and experiences of Moses, discussing key events in his journey as the leader of the Israelites. Moses shared his background, including his upbringing in Egypt, his encounter with a burning bush, and his confrontation with Pharaoh. We explored the 10 plagues of Egypt and their significance, as well as the parting of the Red Sea and the miraculous escape of the Israelites. We also discussed the 40-year journey through the wilderness, its purpose, and the lessons the Israelites learned during this time. Additionally, we touched upon the concept of cleanliness in the context of the Israelites' journey and the eventual arrival of the Israelites in the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua. Finally, we concluded with an overview of the 10 Commandments, their origin, and their significance for both ancient and modern people. Throughout the conversation, we emphasized the importance of faith, trust in the Lord, and the spiritual lessons that can be derived from the experiences of Moses and the Israelites.